Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us today for the School to Work for Year 11 and 12 students Part 1, Finding Work, Getting Started. So I'm Jan Kruger, the Executive Director of Imagine More, and I'm here today with Fiona McIntosh, who is the School to Work Coordinator at Imagine More. We have had to record this session again as we had technical issues with the live presentation yesterday. So for those that did watch this live yesterday, you will notice it looks slightly different, but we hope that you find this presentation really useful. So we'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. And we extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So for those that don't know much about our organisation, Imagine More, we're Canberra-based and a family-led organisation. And we have a strong vision for a community where everybody is included and included in valued and contributing meaningful roles. And our aim is to empower individuals and families in the community to become inspired, motivated, and capable of ensuring that people with disability hold valued social roles, develop meaningful relationships, and live typical lives in their communities. So we do this through a number of mechanisms. So we run conferences, such as the one that's coming up in October that will be virtual, and it will be called Get That Good Life Conference. So it will capture speakers from international speakers, national speakers, and local presenters, focusing on inclusive education, employment, home, relationships, and building connections. We also run a number of peer support groups. We've got a few running on the theme of employment, and we have one on imagining home, one on inclusive education, and we're also looking to be starting one around self-managing your NDIS funding shortly. We run topic-based workshops similar to this, and we have an online one coming up around My Home, My Way, and you can register for that now. And we'll also have one coming up on inclusive education, and that's also going to be online. We also really invest in individual and family leadership, because we know that when families are strengthened through capacity building mechanisms that we use, we know that they can go on to walk the talk of fully including their family member with disability in all life has to offer. Over to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Jan. So the School to Work project, the project is about inspiring, increasing the confidence and motivation of students with disability and their families to start a path to meaningful work. It's a 3-year project that we're doing with our partners in New South Wales, which is Resourcing Inclusive Communities, which is an initiative of family advocacy, and also the Community Resource Unit in Queensland. It's targeted at secondary school students with disability, and our primary group that we're looking to target in this project is students with intellectual and developmental disability, as we know that they are less likely to have opportunities for paid, meaningful work in the long term. But having said that, the material that we present has universal principles and practices that can be applied to all students with disability. This project has been funded by the Department of Social Services, and we're currently renewing our content for the webinars coming up later at the end of this year. And this is the 4th set of webinars that we've provided through this project to young people in Year 7 and 8, Year 9 and 10, and Year 11 and 12. So the focus of today's webinar is really increasing your knowledge about possibilities and to give you some tools to help you create those opportunities. So first of all, we're going to have a look at where you might think about making a start. And we're going to look at the concept of the good life. And we're also going to look at thinking about a vision for your family member and how we might go about creating it. Then we're going to have a look at a method called customised employment, and we're going to look at 4 areas there: discovering the person, their interests, their strengths, their motivations, and looking at how we might conceptually link those to potential work roles. We'll be talking about how you might cultivate or create opportunities with employers, and we'll also talk through how you might engage people to support your family member at their work experience or paid work or a micro enterprise. And then we're going to look at how we set the young person up for success in terms of ongoing support and growth of their skills. But we'll be going into that in a lot more depth in the webinar too. The other thing that we'll be talking about is specific types of experiences. So work experiences, Australian school-based apprenticeships, paid work and self-employment. In our content today, we've sought to address the majority of your questions that you've raised in your registrations. And there were a few there that we've pulled out that we'll talk about at the end. So in terms of our core beliefs that we bring to this project and more generally here at Imagine More, so we really believe in supporting one person at a time to create opportunities around one person as opposed to a group of people. We believe strongly in doing that through the provision of one-to-one tailored support for that young person. We believe in the right of all young people to access typical, wonderfully ordinary, meaningful paid work opportunities, both at school, but for their whole adult life. We also believe in full inclusion, that is relationships between people with and without disability. We strongly believe in an abundance of employment opportunities waiting to be uncovered. We believe in the power and capacity of families and allies to create change for their family member and more generally for young people with disability. We know that a positive mindset will help us to see opportunities and help us to create opportunities. We believe in the endless capacities of people with disability for growth, and we know that valued roles help people achieve the good life.
So when you hear the concept of the good life, it might conjure up different meanings to you. It might mean to you that it's a life of luxury and comfort. It could mean to others that it could be just something that brings you joy and contentment. But usually, and we'd like you to reflect on this, but usually when we ask people this question, their responses are very similar, and this is universal. So it's things like a place to call home, lifelong learning, good health was particularly on our minds with COVID impacting our lives, having a means of communication, being heard and being understood, a hope for the future. And what brings us here today is about meaningful employment. So that's actually one of the most critical things that people are focusing on when they move into adulthood. So why would that be any different for a person with disability? But so often we know that this can often be very difficult for people with disability to achieve due to common low expectations of this particular group of people in our community. And when there's low expectations, what then gets offered to people is usually segregated lives that take them away from the broader community. So what we can do about this is looking at ways that we can reframe our expectations, hold higher expectations for what could be achieved for people, and really do the intentional planning for them to look for a life that's embedded in the community, that encapsulates the good things in life. So when we talk about this, we talk about holding that vision. And sometimes it's about families reclaiming that vision for their family member with a disability, because we can often get sort of taken on that different path. And it's never too late to start, dreaming again for what could be possible. And we're going to take you through some strategies today to help you sort of think through ways that we could start observing and noticing some different things about our family member that might help us believe in what is possible. So the importance of having that vision, it actually is bigger than just employment. It's actually encapsulating all of those things that were on that previous slide around what makes up the good things in life. And it can, when we write those vision statements down, it can actually really help shift the thinking around what is possible. It can provide us that clarity and direction around where we're heading, because if we don't know where we're going, we're never going to get there. It also really empowers the person with disability. If we're talking about the good things in life and what they can aspire to, they're more likely to start believing that is possible for themselves. It could also help with decision making, especially if we sometimes get on a different path unintentionally that's not leading to the good things in life. It can help us with that decision making around what's actually going to get me closer to that. And hence, it's going to then help with that goal setting and planning. So when we're talking about a vision for a good life, of course, we're talking about work as well, and having that positive vision for what could be possible. So we really want people to start thinking beyond just post-school options and readiness approaches and skilling up people that may potentially hold them back from taking on real opportunities in the community. Because we know that when people are offered different opportunities around work, that is when we see their potential. We believe that people have lifelong learning, and if it's all comes back to what we present to people and those opportunities again for that presumed competence where their learning will continue on for their whole of life. We know that when people take up valued roles, such as being an employee, then that builds their self-confidence and self-esteem. And it's more likely to happen if we have that clear vision, because when we've got that clear vision, it helps us see what is possible. As Fiona mentioned, we believe that there's an abundance of opportunities in the community. We've just got to be able to see them. And it all starts with deeply understanding who the person is. When we know who the person is, that helps us then link who they are, what they enjoy, what sort of really intrinsically motivates them to potential work roles in the community. So we're going to show you some examples of what some vision statements can look like. And we have more than just the two we'll show you today. And we'll follow up with this. You'll notice them on the resource pack that we've sent through to you. So this is Rhiannon's vision statement that I will read to you. And I just want you to really just listen to what this sounds like and that how it captures the whole of life. So we as a family and circle of friends hold a vision for Rhiannon for her to be living an ordinary life filled with fun, friends and family, to be seen as a person in her own right with many valued roles and fully appreciated for her innate gifts, feeling safe and respected, given opportunities to pursue her interest streams and aspirations as a contributing member of the community, emotionally aware of herself and others, maturing as an individual, developing good self-respect, self-discipline and independence, and able to bounce back from the hard knocks of life, educated to her full potential and supported appropriately where she needs it. So in basic terms, to be actively involved in the same experiences and opportunities that have been available to others, including her brothers and sisters at her age, It's the same as any parent wants for their children. So as you can see, I know myself that I could use this vision statement or something similar for any of my children. And this is what it's all about. It's the same vision. And you may not know how you're going to get there, but that will come. This is an example of my son's vision statement, Jack. And a lot of the guiding principles for Jack's vision statement is derived from social rolarization theory. And it's a theory that actually underpins all the work of Imagine More. And it has been really instrumental in helping us make decisions for Jack in his life. Jack's now 19 and working in two highly valued work roles, and he's also studying at CIT. And this has been very much driven by his vision. So our vision for Jack is to contribute and participate through valued social roles such as work, and have positive relationships following an ordinary rhythm of life. So we want to make sure that he's doing things during his week when other people are present in the community. We don't want him to be doing things when nobody's there, because this is where he's going to find that sense of belonging and to be valued and known in his local community. We also have a statement that changes from year to year and relevant to where Jack is in his life. So as you can imagine, it's changed throughout his schooling years, and even the statement we've had for 2021 looks very different to this. But we've used the 2020 statement because we know a lot of you joining us today have family members that are in year 11 and 12, and this is more relevant to you. So you'll see in our statement here, it helps us focus on the valued roles that Jack is really interested in. And in 2020, he was really keen on focusing on being a friend, which continues today, being an emerging YouTuber, an OzTag player, neighbour, and after-school care educator, which he's currently or continues to work in that role. We also have things that are looking further into the future, such as getting his driver's license, future employment, marriage, a home of his own. So it's a very typical dream that we have for Jack, as we do for his older three sisters. And his three sisters have been really helpful in helping us imagine what life can look like. So we encourage you to look at those, typical ordinary life goals that anyone would have in our community. And that's what we should be expecting for our sons and daughters with disability. We also highlighted and clearly articulated sort of what we really want for Jack's future and what we didn't want. We wanted to make sure that if anything happened to my husband and I, that people were really clear to carry on this vision for Jack with some clarity around what we did and didn't want. So we wanted to make sure that he would live in a home of his own with people he chooses, to have meaningful work that's well supported, have opportunities to travel, and have many and varied friendships, and have that support to maintain old friendships, to go out and enjoy life as a young person, to stay fit and healthy and strong, and to be supported to make decisions and not have them made for him. This takes time, but it's really important. We wanted to make sure that people would be clear that we did not want him to be living a life that was congregated only with people with disability. This is nothing against people with disability. Of course, Jack still has friends that have a disability, but we didn't want it to be limited to only being in environments where there's only people with disability. We wanted him to be well connected and broadly. And this is the same with employment. We want him to be having typical employment opportunities. So in order for this to happen, it doesn't just have to rest with you. You could be reaching out to people that know your young person well, build those sort of networks, bring them together, share your vision of what you want for their future. Because when people are clear on what you're striving for, they will then know how they can help you get there. So we also run the peer support groups, as I mentioned, and this is a great way for families to come together to support each other in their thinking and planning. We recently had a peer employment support group last week, and it was really lovely to see the different families supporting a particular mum around supporting her young person to get into work experience, and came up with some great strategies and next steps. You can also then engage some formal paid support to help you with this thinking and planning. And you'll see as we go through the session today where that can really fit nicely. It could be with engaging your own job mentor, for instance. But what we want you to really be aware of is to not overlook the importance of the informal supports, because they're more likely to be there for life and really worth investing and bringing them on board around helping your young person achieve their vision.
Now we're going to have a look at customised employment. So thinking first about what are the traditional ways that employment opportunities are created, particularly for people with intellectual disability. So from the 1950s, we saw the emergence of sheltered workshops, which was groups of people working usually in a centre. That has now evolved into Australian Disability Enterprises, which still operate today. So again, they're about only groups of people with disability working together. They can be centre-based, but also they could be out and about in the community looking at various roles. They also, what we see as well is groups of volunteers of people with disability, where that work doesn't actually translate into paid work. So traditionally, that sort of employment is known as supported employment. Then we have what's known as open employment, which is supported by disability employment services. So the way that that works is in terms of employment creation is typically there's relationships built between the providers and employers. And as opportunities come up, those employment services will put people forward to be considered by the employer. Mostly it is still a competitive process. So those opportunities aren't necessarily individualised around one person. They can be group opportunities. So this contrasts really with customised employment, which is about a much more individualised approach. So those traditional approaches we know can disadvantage people with disability in that in terms of competitive processes, people with intellectual disability are often competing with others, and also there tends to be small contained roles within those grouped employment settings, so that the person really has a small set of tasks that they do, and that remains with them for a long time. So what we're going to have a look at now is the notion of what customised employment is, which is really about finding out about the young person, their strengths, their interests, their capabilities and potential contributions, and finding potential employment that fits with those particular attributes. So it's really about supporting one person at a time, not around supporting a group of people. So this video really shows you, gives you a bit of a sense of what customised employment might look like.
The baker had some old, and everybody saw that she could do the job. The lawyer went to the baker and saw Simone at work. The lawyer hired John because the baker had Simone. The baker had Simone. The dentist went to the lawyer and saw John at work. The dentist had Sophia because the lawyer hired John, because the baker had Simone. The baker had Simone. The farmer went to the dentist and saw Sophia at work. The farmer had cake because the dentist had some feel, because the lawyer had John, because the baker had Simone. The baker had Simone. The farmer went to the farmer, the saw gated work. The farmer had Paul because the farmer had cake, because the dentist had some feel, because the lawyer had John, because the baker had Simone. The baker had Simone. The baker went to the barber. He saw Paul at work, he didn't have a clue, but it was thanks to his first move that the barber had Paul, because the farmer had cake, because the dentist had Sophia, because the lawyer had John, because the baker had Simone, the baker had Simone, the baker had Simone. Yeah.
Thanks. So we love that video for many reasons, but the main is it really shows the power of when people see people with disability in a valued role, and the power of that to influence others and change perceptions about their competence. And it also demonstrates the importance of paying attention to people's image when they're in the role, and also making sure that they're doing tasks that really do showcase their competence. The next video that we're going to have a look at is how customised employment works in the context of self-employment.
And just while you're watching this, just pay attention to the efforts the family went to identifying the things that they needed to change in order for Annie to be really successful in the role.
We had high hopes for 2020. We had thought that it would be the culmination of many years of hard work for Annie and preparing her for moving on to post-school options. In the middle of last year, we started looking for work experience opportunities for Annie. She was very fortunate and she was offered work experience at hairdressers. The hairdresser that she'd always gone to from when she was very little. She did a 5-week work experience package with them. Annie was a natural at it. She loves being around people, loves being as part of a small team, and in the end they actually offered her a job. So she was working for them one afternoon a week as a salon assistant, and then COVID hit. And the world as we knew it changed completely overnight. That salon closed, and when it reopened, they reopened in a smaller scale and there wasn't a role for her there. Obviously, like all of the work experience options that we had lined up, as well as volunteering, all of that just fell away. It really impacted on Annie and how she felt about herself and her self-esteem. She knew it was about the virus, but she couldn't see anything past it. We had to adapt. Starting a business wasn't part of our plans for Annie. I didn't have any more time to start a business, but here we are.
I started a business. My mum asked me. She had a great idea and I said yes. It's about my grandpa. He was a farmer. He really happy to sell chestnuts.
So the business is a chestnut roasting van. We roast fresh chestnuts from our family farm. They're grown at Batlow on trees that are 25 years old. They're harvested by our family and we sell them at a farmer's market, freshly roasted. They're delicious. The chestnut roasting itself is a seasonal business. It operates from April through to August. There's nothing more important in the whole world to Annie than her family, and this ticked all the boxes. We looked at the business processes around the van. We looked at how we packaged up the chestnuts, how we could make it so it was easier for Annie to do. We looked at the sales. It was predominantly cash sales in the van historically. We knew that EFTPOS was easier for Annie, so we had to go and look at what sort of point of sale system we would use using EFTPOS, and to sort of set that up and then to learn how to use it. So we really looked at all of the aspects of the business and then modified those so that they were more appropriate to Annie's needs and to what she could do, knowing that at the beginning she'd need a fair bit of support to do most of the roles, but then in time she should be able to do all of them.
I cut chestnuts. We do it every Fridays. We always listen to music when we do it, and I had fun. We weigh it and then he put in a bag and then we take it to our business. Me and my auntie Tracy, we do chestnuts together. We do samples and then we give it new one try. I said to them how much, and then I get cash and card.
My role working with Annie is to mentor her with her business. My main strategy to support Annie was to make everything fun, because she was really excited about the business and I wanted to maintain that excitement. To help Annie learn the money skills, we played a lot of money games like Zingo, and we also did role plays because Annie's studying drama and loves it. So I decided to make chestnuts fun by making a playlist. So we have a special Annie playlist on my phone. We did 2 online courses. We did the I'm Alert food safety. The food handling certificate had a lot of reading, so we broke it down into manageable chunks. She was so capable of it and I was so proud of her for doing all this hard work.
When you start a business, it's really important to make sure that you have all of the regulatory aspects of the business in order. You have to work out what type of structure you want to operate in, registrations and licenses you need. We were aware that we would need to get a food licence, and we then had to acquire skills to be able to operate that business. There's great information out there on the business.gov.au. It has really helpful step-by-step instructions on how to start a business. Made sure we had public liability insurance, workers' comp. The business is already a success because of what Annie's got out of it. With each week it gets easier. As you sort of tick off the list of business aspects to get up and running, then that's done, it's sorted. And then you can move on to the next thing. If she chooses to go into it and do more next year, fabulous. If she gets a job and she decides she wants to do something else, great.
I'm really happy and I like it. It's really fun.
So that video really demonstrates, I guess, the power of being able to completely customise our business around the needs of one person. And in that, you would have noticed they, started out with small tasks and then have really grown Annie's skills as time has gone on. And also they've been able to adapt the way that the business is run so that she's able to eventually be able to take on all of the tasks within that business. So the other thing is you would have noticed there, Catherine, talking at the end about really encouraging Annie to look at other opportunities as well. And Annie, so in addition to doing the chestnut business, is also doing some part-time paid work and is also studying a business certificate. So yeah, that is really going from strength to strength. Did you want to say anything else, Jan, about that video?
Yeah, like they've been, they're delicious, by the way. I think COVID will affect whether they're going to markets anymore. But Annie's role she's more independent in the sales of it. She does a lot of the marketing as well. So she'll walk around through the markets promoting the chestnuts and getting the word out there. So I think what this demonstrates is that starting small, but then building more and more tasks that Annie can achieve over time is really important.
Okay, so now we're going to have a look more in depth in customised employment. So it's a approach which has been around since the 1970s. It came out of the US and it's been in Australia for about the last 10 years. And Jan and I have seen it really successfully work here in Canberra over the last 5 years. So in terms of the stages, the first stage is discovery. So this is really about finding out who the person is and their potential contributions. It also is looking at their conditions for success. And what those conditions for success means is things that need to be present in the environment or not present in order for that young person to thrive. The next stage of customised employment is around cultivating employment opportunities. So this is where we go out and we make conceptual links between potential roles and the young person, and we go out and we research those work roles or industries. And it involves doing some research among our networks, but it can also involve engaging employers. It's at this stage as well, once after we've done our research, that we might propose an opportunity for work experience paid work. The third stage is around engaging employment supports. So this is looking for people who can support your family member to succeed on the job. And if you're self-managing NDIS funding, you can get your own job coach or job mentor, or you might engage an employment service provider. The fourth stage then is looking at ongoing support and career development. So how do we set that young person up for success from day one? We'll be touching on that today, but we'll be going in much more depth in webinar 2. So discovering the person. What we want to do here is build what we call a documented discovery profile. All that is really is a story about the young person in images and words, about their strengths, their interests, their motivations, their capabilities. We also would in this discovery profile include those conditions of success, and we'll talk a bit about that soon. What we are really looking to include in here is observations about the young person, both what you've observed and learned about your young person up until now, but also what you observe into the future. So discovery is really it helps you to get started on looking for potential opportunities, but ideally it's a document that never ends. It's also ideally observations of others who know your young person well. So that might be family members, it might be school staff, it might be people who are involved in group activities that they're involved in, and really just bringing those observations together. You can do this through having one-on-one communication with people, but also something that can be really useful is a group gathering. Jan talked earlier about the notion of a circle of support, which is people who come together who know your family member well, and bringing people together. There's real power in brainstorming a more diverse range of observations than what you might have been able to come up with as one person.
Yeah, and this is just you'll see in the image here, this is where we help Jack facilitate his own circle gathering, and including young people as well, because they can often come up with some great ideas of what is typical and ordinary for people of similar age. And we recently helped another young lady facilitate a gathering. It wasn't a formalised circle of support per se, but it was people that knew her well in a freely given way that came together and helped go identify what her strengths were, what her interests were and what they saw in her. And then from there identified some potential conditions for success that they would think would be important in a workplace. And then we started brainstorming some ideas around what some particular work roles could look like around a particular interest of hers. And it was so empowering for her and the group, and it's given them some really good ideas to sort of work with.
Questions to discover the person. Within the resource page that we're going to send out to you today, there's going to be a template with some additional questions, but these are some of the key. So you might ask, what is important to the person? What do they get excited about? So what you're looking for here is their body language and, you know, what really, really lights them up. What do they like to do in their spare time? What are they great at? What are they intrinsically motivated by? And this is really about their internal drive, which we know helps people to learn new tasks. So if we can get a good fit between the person's motivations and the work environment, that's a really good thing to have. What holds a person's interest for longest? What types of environments do they like to be around? And also, what preferences do they have? So now thinking about those conditions of success. So what these are about are really asking what helps a young person to thrive. So one of the key things to think about is, how do they best learn? Do they learn from being shown things? Do they learn from verbal instruction? Do they like looking at instructions in terms of diagrams? Do they like picking things up from tutorials, say video tutorials? These, particularly knowing how the young person learns best, will really help them on the job. Also, to think about what are the things to avoid or minimise exposure to. So these are often triggers within the environment. So that might be things like noise, it might be overcrowding, it might be something about the environment that makes the person distressed or anxious, things that you really are hoping to avoid, or at least at the very beginning minimise exposure to. Also, think about the young person's communication styles, and again, how that can also go to influence how they best learn, in terms of whether they're a visual learner, or they learn by doing something, or whether they enjoy best from being told. Think about whether your young person likes to do tasks that are very familiar to them a lot, or as in a routine, or whether they prefer to have much more variety of tasks. That can also mean, you know, do they like to be in one environment, for example, or would they prefer to travel around to different environments as part of their life, as part of their work role? Also think about hours that might suit the young person at their best. Some people are much better in the afternoon, some people are early morning people, and yeah, just in terms of thinking about, because that also influences where you might be looking. And within the where is also thinking about what kind of locations might suit. So if your young person likes to ride a bike, for example, that might be a way of being able to access work that's close to them. If they're able to travel on a bus. Just thinking about what are the kinds of locations that are really going to suit your young person. Also thinking about what's the images that are important for them. Often young people are motivated by a uniform and how others are dressed around them. And when we find that role, the opportunity for young people to be able to wear that uniform can bring a real sense of pride and belonging in the workplace where they are. After you've had a look at noticed the young person's attributes and conditions for success, what you want to do now is conceptually link those to potential work roles. So we're going to show you 2 brainstorms after this slide, which shows you this process. So first of all, what you would do is you would pick 2 or 3 of the attributes, and then for each one, you would brainstorm possible related work tasks, work roles and tasks within those roles. Then you would look at where would you find those particular work roles or tasks, and then you would say, for those places, who might know more about that particular workplace, or more generally the industry. It's a great thing to do with others, because At this stage, what you're trying to do is increase the number of possibilities rather than try and narrow it down to a particular career path that you're looking at. So this is one of the conceptual exercises. So where the young person has an interest of cutting. So a circle have come together and brainstorm some ideas about potential work roles that would involve cutting. So we've got things there like material shop assistant, a bricklayer, a nursery assistant, bread maker. And while some of these may not resonate or really suit the young person, what you're trying to do is think, well, is there anything about that role that actually would be attractive to my young person? Is there like a task or something? Because often it's the essence of what you come up with as opposed to necessarily identifying the whole work role that might be of interest for your young person. And really, this is just about setting a path for research. So you can see there in the blue, we've got the work roles. In the red, then that is listing workplaces where people might work with those particular roles. And then the green is about people who you or your circle might know who could give you some more information about what that work role is like. So this is a brainstorm about somebody who has continuous movement. So a lot of young people do have that need and that drive to move kind of continuously. And what they've done there is they've come up with, they've gotten as far as the roles and then started to identify some of the tasks that might be there in that role. But Jen, did you want to share, just, I know you've had success with, in terms of brainstorming potential work roles within your circle and how that's actually been able to lead to a possibility.
Yeah, and I think it was like over the years, Jack's sort of done various different work roles that's been identified by the circle members, such as Jack had a real interest in sport. He played soccer for many years. And so the young people in his circle were saying, have you thought of Jack becoming a game leader, which is a type of referee? It's like the entry level. And once we sort of worked out, well, what would it take for Jack to become a game leader, we recognised that it was just a 2-hour course that he had to do that was very practical, so therefore very achievable for him, really tapped into how he learns. And then it was a beautiful experience for him because he could actually do the work with the support of other game leaders, and he would then be rewarded with the payment straight afterwards. So he got a real understanding of what that looked like. So that's just sort of one example of them working on that whole interest around sport and then what that could lead to.
Thanks, Dan. So following on from that, we're going to look at another video of CamCan, which is a micro enterprise which has been created around Cameron. And his parents noticed one of his attributes were around waiting. So sometimes we hear that from families, they're just not sure how they can identify a potential work role or task that their young person could do. But this is really, I guess, an example of noticing and being able to take that idea and then turn it into something for someone.
Yeah. And you'll also notice that, you know, many people around Cameron didn't hold really very high expectations for him, for his life after school. And so the family and the people around Cameron had to delve deep. And what you'll see in this story is that everyone has a gift. Everyone has something that you can build on and have the potential of moving that into a work role. So, yeah, it's a great story.
Most of us get friendships and social connection and community connection. A big part of that is work. Everybody said Cameron couldn't work. What could he possibly do? He should be at a day centre with 2 or 3 large men like my good self to keep him under control. And this is when our 7-year-old was taking him across to the local park playing by himself. But no, the system said no, he would need at least 2, if not 3 big men with him all the time to keep him under control. We knew that was not true. But the struggle that we had was, his life experience, he's now 16, 17 years old. He has little to no recognisable skills, no recognisable relationships. Where do you start? But we thought, well, why don't we create a business for him to leave school? So when he leaves school, he goes straight into his own business and he starts work. But what would he do? He didn't have any recognisable skills, so what could we possibly do to help him create this business? Thankfully, we had a lot of people in his support crew that were absolutely committed believers. And one day for a period of time, we were doing some major renovations to our home. And when we came to the end of that, we decided to put the Foxtel off. This is in the day when it was reasonably new. And when I'm sure you've all experienced this. You ring them up and you say, when can you come? And they say, well, be home between 9 and 12 or 12 and 5. And I said, well, you must mean Saturday then. And they said, no, during the week we don't work on Saturdays. And as I was having this conversation with this man, I was looking at Cameron. He was sitting on the lounge and he was waiting for a support worker to come and take him out. And it dawned on me that Cameron had been waiting all his life to get a life, because he simply didn't have one. So I took this idea to the support crew and I said, Cameron's really good at waiting. That's his one fantastic skill. He waits all the time for everything. Waits us to get him up in the morning, waits for us to give him breakfast, waits for him to get dressed, waits for him to go to school. He's waiting. So with that small idea, we created a business. And it's a waiting service. And he does it, he's been doing it for 9 years now. And the idea was, if you go to Harvey Norman, you have Harvey Norman here, I'm assuming, and you buy your fridge and your colour TV, and they need to deliver it, they will say, just like the Foxtel guy, they will say, be home between 9 and 12 or 12 and 5. And most people can't do that because they have to work, and they don't do it on Saturdays. So Cameron comes and does the waiting for you, for a fee. And while he's there, he has a list of things that he can do for you, like clean your car if it's there, get the cobwebs down, clean the driveway, do the edges, stuff like that, sweep the leaves. And all those things that when you come home on weekends you don't want to do yourself because that's leisure time for you.
Thanks, Jen. So as Jen said there, everybody really has a gift, and it's so important to look deeply into people's attributes and really just give time and bring others in who you trust, who can help you discover what those gifts are. But we really strongly do believe in the gifts that everybody has. And it is also a focus in our employment peer groups as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, there's always people who can help you who can help support you to delve down into what those attributes might be. Okay, so now we're on to cultivating employment opportunities. So we've done as much work as we can in terms of discovering the young person and building that profile. So the first thing that we want to do is what we would call information interviews, or which is really just collecting information about workplaces and industries. So maybe start with your top 3 attributes. So attributes that you think, yep, this definitely describes what my young person is about and is interested in. You're looking really at this stage to just purely be curious. You're not pitching an opportunity or anything. So please don't put yourself under that pressure. Also ask from different perspectives. So you might be asking as a customer of a particular business, you might be asking somebody who works there, you might be asking somebody who's on the board of a particular organisation. But really the richer and more varied perspectives that you can ask about organisations, the better. What is also a good thing to try and focus on is the employer's pain points. So that really gives you a sense of where the business needs are and where potential opportunities might arise from. So say, for instance, There's a cafe who is really busy at certain points of the day, and people are walking away from their waiting line. That could be turned into and proposed as an opportunity down the track that your young person might come and fill. But if you get those sense of what the organisation's about and their particular pain points, that's going to help you later on propose an opportunity. So once you've kind of gathered some information and you've got a really good gut feel about organisations, and just kind of be thinking about, how do people, if it's a customer facing kind of organisation, how do people speak to each other? Like that can even be an indicator of an organisational culture and whether they're going to be supportive. So the second stage is to go pick a few workplaces to go back to actually propose an opportunity, which might be work experience, it might be part-time paid work, it might be a apprenticeship, and what you really want to do is highlight the potential positive contributions of your family member. And we'll talk about some language shortly about how you can do that. You would be hoping for to land some kind of positive introduction between the employer and your family member. And also, it's very common to ask for interview adjustments. So let's say you've gone to somebody, they've said, yeah, I'd be happy to interview your son or daughter. Making it as easy as possible for your son or daughter so that they can shine really in that interview process is important. So that might be things like asking for questions before the interview. It might be things like asking for a bit of a trial so that the person can actually see what your young person is capable of. Then once they've said yes, what you want to do is confirm the opportunity. So that means negotiating the start date and the wage if it's a part-time paid work. So if you don't have employment supports at that point in time, if you can get a little bit longer to actually help set that up so you can engage somebody if your family member needs that support, is a good thing. The more that that job can be set up in the beginning is going to give the young person the greatest chance of success to succeed on the job. So at that point, you would be engaging the support, and that might be a job mentor, and it might be an employment service. If you're doing work experience or an apprenticeships through the schools, that is when you would sign an agreement or contract with them, and that would include the insurance coverage. At that point in time, often as well as part of those applications, and what you would do also is a bit of a risk assessment to see what the potential risks are in any task before the young person starts. So as you're going out and finding out about industries, the internet has so much information about what particular work roles and industries are like. One of their great websites is this one called Job Outlook, and what it has there is industries, work roles, tasks. It has things like expected pay rates, all that sort of thing. But what you do is you put in the information about the particular work role or industry, and it will give you back a set of tasks that are typical for that workplace or work role. And these can also be a great conversation starter to have with employers in terms of whether they do particular tasks or what those particular tasks might involve, so you get a bit of a picture about what might best suit your son or daughter.
And it's a great website too that you can actually be using, especially if you're in lockdown with COVID, doing that sort of online research around what some potential industries might look like. So, yeah, it's a great part of that informational interview gathering.
So when you are up to the stage of proposing an opportunity, really try and choose workplaces that you have identified in your information interviews. When you're making a pitch to an employer, is really to emphasise the value that the person will bring to the employer. So even though customised employment is really about person-centred, coming from the person's perspective, you're still trying to get a good fit between what it is that the person will bring or potentially bring, and what the employer might need. You would at that stage, you would propose an introduction between the employer and your young person, and you might also leave a resume there. One of the things that we really highly advocate is to persevere. So it's not uncommon for people to go in and pitch something to an employer and not hear anything back for 3 or 4 months, especially in this climate where everything is a little bit uncertain. It's the important thing is not to leave it just in their court. So so you could say things like, is it okay if I give you a call in a couple of weeks to see if you've had a chance to make a decision, and then really kind of persevere with that approach. So we are going to go into much more detail in our second webinar about how to propose an opportunity, and also how to craft a resume, which might be a written resume with photos, or it might be a video. So in terms of talking to the employer about the positive and possible contributions of your young person, where it's relevant, try and relate it to the actual potential work role. So we saw from the video that Cam is really patient and good at waiting. So if you were pitching that to a business where that was an important thing for their workplace, you would emphasize that. So other things you might emphasize, for example, that could be potential work contributions. So they always want to finish a task before moving on to the next. They're really friendly. She takes every opportunity to meet and speak with new people. They can navigate to places without a map. They organise for people to come together. They enjoy providing morning teas at the wetland working bees, or they're fascinated with pulling apart electronics. Again, these examples may or may not resonate with you. It really depends on your young person's attributes and how you see it fitting in potentially into a workplace. So now what we want to do is once the employer has said yes, is to make sure that our employment support can help us to set up that role. Families can do this, but it is one of those areas that engaging a support, either a job mentor through, if you're self-managing NDIS, or an employment service provider, can really benefit. We know rarely that, but it does happen, that school staff also can accompany students on work experience placements and apprenticeships, but that is, we know that that's quite rare. So I guess check in early with your career advisors at your school to see whether that is something that they do. So at least that gives you a bit of lead time to plan ahead in terms of seeking funding or approaching providers to help you. So when to engage employment supports? Ideally, it would be great if employment supports could be engaged right up front before employment planning has commenced. They can help you with discovery, and there is definitely an advantage in having an outsider with fresh eyes to come in and help you facilitate the discovery process. And they may notice things about your son and daughter if they can go to them in different environments where you aren't necessarily, because I guess different environments bring out different things in all of us, and people are different depending on kind of who's around. Another time you might think about it is when you're approaching employers for placements or work. Again, employment providers do have a lot of relationships with employers, but you would need to ask them about, are they willing to engage in a customised employment approach as opposed to the regular channel that they might be kind of offering, so that the employers that you, and really it's a question of, are they prepared to approach an employer who you've identified as a potential fit for your son or daughter? most commonly, people are engaging employment supports at the point that a placement is offered. What can happen though is, say for instance, we've often heard of work experience being offered at school where something's offered one week and people are starting the next. So it can be a lot of pressure on families to get employment supports in place. Ideally, also, if you start earlier, the relationship and knowledge that that person will have about how your son or daughter learns will make for a better placement. It's easier for them to set that job up for success. The other time you might be thinking about it is you've had no job support, but your young family member is engaged in work or work experience. It's already started and for some reason it's not working. Bringing somebody in at that stage can also be a great advantage. And I guess what we wanted to say is ideally start early, but it's never too late to bring somebody in. So when you're looking at employment support and what do families do versus what others do. So we know of families who have really taken the lead under self-management, and they would manage the whole process from discovery to employment support in terms of engaging people. Or you might choose to do it in partnership with service providers from the beginning or at later stages.
So when you're thinking about, finding somebody to do some job mentoring, or you're approaching a service provider, it's good to really understand, well, what does employment support look like? I know as a family, we've done a lot of learning over the years around what this looks like, and the customised employment approach has been really informative. So that pre-work phase, so before the person started work experience or paid work, they could be really helping with that discovery process. So uncovering, who is the person, doing observations, watching the young person in a familiar environment, watching them in something new. It could also be skilling that support, employment support mentor up with skills on doing some interviews with people that knows the young person well. And then they could be helping even find the work or find the work experience and build on those pre-work skills. So be wary of the endless readiness programs that are out there, because we know that the different roles that people take up can be so varied. So, for example, we saw Annie's story where she's working at the markets, cooking chestnuts and selling them. Preparation for that particular work role is very different to her other work role where she's working in an office environment. So it's much better for people with intellectual impairment to actually learn the job on the job and prepare for it before they start, as opposed to learning something in a classroom setting and having to transfer that knowledge. So another benefit for understanding what the employment support can look like is knowing what it should look like on the job. So the mentors should be all about making sure that the young person's going to get the typical orientation and training that's provided by the workplace staff. But what the mentor can do, if they know the young person well, they can provide some tips around what that could look like if they need to alter that in any way. So if the young person does better in learning by things being demonstrated or by having a checklist, they could actually then advise the workplace around those additional insights to set it up well for the young person. Because if the intention is to fade that support, that job mentor support, you need to be leaving the workplace confident in knowing how to teach tasks to the young person and how to best support them on the job. Another role could be breaking down the different tasks and identifying the different workplace staff that know how to teach it well. And you'll know that if you've worked in this environment, because you can certainly pinpoint the people that are very concise and clear on giving instruction. They can also identify future opportunities. So, for instance, Annie, when she was working at the markets, there was an opportunity identified that going out and in amongst the farmers' markets to bring the customers in by sharing some samples of the chestnuts. And they can also be implementing different strategies that we'll go into further in next week's session around using task analysis and systematic instruction. It also can help, the job mentor role can help build the competence and confidence of the young person. So they could be even doing some role playing with the person before they start the job, or practicing different things in the home environment to skill them up. And most importantly, it's a very thoughtful role around ensuring that the sheer presence of the employment support doesn't unintentionally throw the young person into being seen as a client rather than an employee. Because if they're going in there as a job support worker role, where they're just doing a lot of support and not sort of, moving away when needed, they can be making that person seem really reliant on having a job mentor there all of the time. So it's a very thoughtful role. That you don't want them there when they're not needed. And that's why these attributes that we've sort of seen commonly in people in that sort of mentor role is where they're very humble, patient, positive, and really encouraging as a potential peer. So when you've got clarity around what the job mentor role looks like, this can help you prepare for some NDIS planning conversations in order to get some funding if you don't already have it. And it all starts with the vision. So that's why we started this session today with holding a clear vision around the whole of life, but particularly for today's session, it's around work. So a vision statement might help you focus on the role that the person wants to focus on, is taking up a valued work role or getting multiple work experience opportunities while they're still at school. So the valued role that you'd be focusing on is either a work experience student or a paid employee. And if you're going to be using any NDIS funding for employment purposes, you have to have a goal that states this. And a lot of young people that we talk to can simply state that in a way of saying, I just want a job. So that can be the goal, but it has to be included in an NDIS plan. And then it's really good for people to be clear on, well, if I do get some funding to support my young person in a work role, what am I going to be getting this support person to be doing? So it could be, as we've discussed in the previous slide, around helping with that discovery profile, pulling that all together. They could be helping secure work experience or finding that paid role. It could then be in preparation for the work experience to start or the job to start. So they're really setting up that young person up well before they have their first day on the job. They can then continue to help support the person to learn the job on the job, and also knowing and who to ask for help and when. They also might be supporting the young person to get to work and get home again, and that could be learning how to catch a bus, for example. So then when you determine what the complementary support role would look like, which in this instance, it would be a job mentor. It then helps you break down, well, how many hours do I think that they'll be needed per week? What kind of training might they need? What technology might be involved? And would they be supporting the young person to get to and from the job? So that really then helps shape what that funding might look like if you're talking to an NDIS plan or LAC. So once you get the funding, then you either might be employing your own job mentor, or you might be going to employment services, but going with some clear questions to help really understand what would the support look like if you're going to an employment service provider. And so you will have a copy of these questions, and we encourage you to read through them and really understand what you're trying to gain from what the type of support would look like. The most important one we think would be to ask is, what has been their track record on getting young people into work experience and then into an actual paid work role. So once you've sort of got the funding, you really need to be thinking about the different experiences that you want to set up for your young person. And we'd really encourage you to look at a vast range. It's not linear, so don't think you've just got to go from work experience and then you'll look for the paid job and then you'll look for the ASVA, for example. You could be doing a range of things at the same time. So, for example, our son, Jack, he had the game leader role happening every Saturday morning. He was also doing work experience through the week, and he was setting up his own very small little lawn mowing business. So, don't think you've got to do one thing at a time. Have lots of irons in the fire. And make sure that when your young person is doing different experiences, try and capture what they're learning. Try and identify what lights them up. And that's another really pivotal role for the job mentor, to capture this. And we'll give you some examples of what that can look like next week. So some of the experiences to look out for is work experience. This can be absolutely starting in year 10. Look for those work experience to inform what kind of Australian school-based apprenticeship you might explore if this is the pathway you're looking at. It also could be looking at those small starting paid employment roles that you might be looking at when kids are typically starting to work. So that's age 15. They could be dabbling in looking at starting up their own little business, and that could be something you could dabble in the holidays during those year 11 school years, or it could be something that you could be kickstarting in those years as well. So then it's that smooth transition from school to work. There's the informal experiences, and this might be where you're up to, so looking in your neighbourhood or volunteering. So some of those initial informal experiences could be simply just looking in your neighbourhood. Where are the opportunities? If people are going away off the weekend, your young person could offer to sort of collect the mail for them. They could be mowing the lawn for them when the grass starts to grow again. They could be pulling the bins in. So if they're away, then it's not looking like they are away, and it's keeping the neighbours safe. So there's lots of opportunities even in your neighbourhood that we would encourage you to look for. So some of the work experience considerations is to look at really, is it a good fit for your young person? So if your young person's loud and vivacious, don't be looking for a workplace environment that needs them to be quiet, like a library, for example. Make sure that the hours suit the young person, and have fun with that. Like when it's work experience, dabble in, is it good for them to be doing a morning and trial an afternoon? Don't necessarily go for the 2-week block that's traditionally offered to young people with a work experience. It could be a couple of hours a week over a term. Look at how the young person might get to and from the work experience. If they're needing to go back to school, that's a consideration to take into account. Look at the different transport that might be used. Will the job mentor be able to drive them to and from there? Could it work in with you going to work yourself? Can they catch the bus or ride a scooter or ride a bike? Fiona mentioned the insurance arrangements. This is typically called a four-way agreement between the student, the family, the school and the workplace. And throughout that agreement, that what's required is to actually identify the different tasks. So that's a really great thing to go into the workplace to really deeply understand what this is going to look like. And we really encourage people to explore the types of tasks that are clear if they're done or if they're not. So, for example, a lot of cleaning jobs take a lot of judgment from the person as to whether the job is done or not. These are the ones that we wouldn't encourage you to start with. So we would encourage you to look for jobs that are clear that are done or not. So if, for example, our son works at Government House and he has to put the flags out every morning. So that's clear when it's done or not. The flags are either there or they're not, as opposed to having to wipe down a table and to make that assessment as to whether that's been done well can be tricky for people with intellectual impairment. So, because that then will affect whether they're seen as competent or not in their job. So we're not saying that don't do them, it's just maybe it's not a starting point. And look for that possible support and use that connection through your employers for the on-the-job support. Having good communication with the employer is also really something we encourage. And look for that referee report, preferably with those details of what the tasks have looked like and which ones were done well by your family member. And also then, if it's a job that a work experience that they've really enjoyed, go in with the pitch saying, you know, would you consider our family member here for future paid employment? We definitely don't want to be encouraging people to, or employers to be taking on your young person for endless work experience. You want this to tip into either a paid role or moving or capturing that information that might lead to a payroll elsewhere. And also have some advice from the person around any future career prospects. So we'll show you now just an example story of our son Jack getting work experience. And this was all came about because Tom, you'll meet Tom in this story. He's part of Jack's circle of support and he happens to work at the University of Canberra. So he was that champion in that workplace to get this work experience for Jack. So this demonstrates the power of actually connecting with people. Now, the way we met Tom was actually Jack's first physio when Jack was 4, and we've since sort of kept connected with him over the years for various different reasons. He's no longer his OT, but it's how we got connected with him.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm 16. I 18. I work at UC. I do data entry. I do lyrics. I have a copy. I started a job.
I'm Jan Kruger. I'm Jack's mum. We were really interested in Jack doing a school-based apprenticeship in year 11 and 12. So we wanted Jack to do a few different work experiences to help us understand where his interests were, because we wanted him to have the best chance of finding paid employment, full-time paid employment once he leaves school. And we thought the school-based apprenticeship was a nice pathway for that to happen. Jack has a circle of support, and all the members of the circle of support explored their workplaces to look for opportunities for Jack to do some work experience. Tom works at the University of Canberra as a lecturer, and he found an opportunity for Jack to do some work experience.
So it all began when Jack and his family came to us and asked about potentially doing some work experience with the Faculty of Health at the University of Canberra. And my initial thought was, well, why not? Why don't we just have a go and figure out how we can get some meaningful and valued roles at the faculty for Jack to do. I needed to seek some permission and approval from our business manager, just to float the idea past them and make sure that all of the proper human resources were maintained, and that we ensured that everyone was safe and all of the legal requirements were met. And that was a very simple process because the systems were relatively in place at the university, which is great. And we just needed to have a team who was willing to try it and provide some ideas around how we could make some really valued work experience for Jack. So once we had the initial approval from business managers and the senior staff, it was really important that we met with the family. And in the meeting with Jack and his family, it was great because the family brought some information around what Jack's interest areas were and his skills that he would be able to demonstrate during work experience, and that helped us open the discussion around what were some of the roles and the tasks that Jack could complete while doing work experience at the university. We said, well, what would a typical work experience look like? And we started there, and I think that was really important. And I think if we started looking at it from Jack, a person with disabilities, it would have been set up incorrectly.
We spoke directly to Tom, who was a lecturer at the University of Canberra, so we had good communications as to what days Jack was working and what tasks he would be doing. Jack has a job coach, Julia, who we employ through Jack's NDIS funding, and she stays with Jack to support him in the tasks throughout the day. We tried to set a bit of a schedule and routine for Jack because we thought that that was going to be really important for the success of Jack's work experience. What we learnt was that Jack didn't actually need set tasks for the day, but what he did need is he needed to know what people he needed to go and see to get the tasks. So that was great because it gave him a variety of different tasks to do, but he had the security of knowing which people he was going to go and see to get the jobs that he needed to do that day. We also trialled using an app that both Tom, Jack, Julia and I all had on our phones. So Tom could upload the different tasks and who Jack needed to go and see to actually get the jobs each day, and then Jack could tick them off as he completed them on the day. We wanted to make the most of Jack's work experience by testing potentially like how many hours he could work in the day. So the University of Canberra were really flexible around that. We also tested working 2 days in a row. We tested Jack doing 2 half days compared to a full day. We also were able to test whether Julia, his job coach, could fade the support at any point, particularly if he could be working alongside the University of Canberra staff. We also looked at different ways Jack could travel to work. So he caught the bus, he rode his bike, and he also went via car. What was really important was having good communication between the University of Canberra staff and ourselves. It didn't all go smoothly, so whenever we hit sort of any rocky patches, we could talk through it. What was really important was to really understand when things were going well for Jack and when they weren't, and put things in place that would improve the work environment for him when it wasn't going well. We really tried to get an understanding of the culture of the workplace there, so we understood that all the staff try and have lunch together. So we made sure we lined up the work experience so Jack would then finish the day having lunch with all the staff. That then led to building relationships, and we believe that has influenced Jack getting paid employment there for and ASBA next year. So as you can see, it did lead to a school-based apprenticeship, but it was a great way for Jack to experience an office environment because he'd never, really entered one before, but he liked the idea of what it looked like to go and work in an office. Another example is Herbert's Healthy Treats. Is a family of a young man that was in Year 10 last year, and during COVID, they didn't want him to miss out on work experience. So they decided to set up a little hobby around making their own horse and dog treats and selling them down at the farm gate because they live rurally and there was a lot of people at home and going past their gate. So it was a great way for them to see what parts of that job, so the cooking part, the packaging part, the driving down to the gate, collecting the money. There was lots of different roles within that business idea that helped them see which bits were intrinsically motivating for their son or not. So moving into the option of an Australian school-based apprenticeship, what we learnt from that, from Jack doing the school-based apprenticeship at the University of Canberra, was that he had to actually have the job and it had to be 8 hours of paid work a week. And what we encourage people to think about is that this doesn't have to be a job forever. It's an experience, and if it leads to work beyond school, year 11 and 12, then that's a great bonus. And Jack's job potentially would have, but as his job was very much hands-on, they couldn't afford to keep him on when the COVID lockdown happened last year, unfortunately. He was contracted to the workplace, so that made it even harder for him to continue to work at the university. But what he did was a certificate work that sat alongside of it that would take up about 3 hours per week, and that all contributed towards his high school certificate. What really helped was finding an RTO, registered training organisation, that was willing to look at alternative methods of assessment, because we knew that was the written assessment of writing answers was not going to work well for Jack. So they assessed whether he was competent in completing tasks through observation, photos and videos. And also what we found that actually having that work experience relationship was really important, that led to the opportunity beyond.
So now we'll have a look at micro-enterprise. So this micro-enterprise, Mrs. Clompy's Closet, is the business of Chloe Reid. So Chloe left school in 2018 and she had a really strong interest in sewing and fashion. So they got a sewing machine and weren't really sure. They started to make some initial kind of products, but her mum was talking at work about Chloe's interest in sewing, and one of her work colleagues asked for some scrunchies to be made in the colours of his daughter's soccer team. So from that one product, now it's turned into a really thriving business, and particularly around the niche of providing scrunchies to sporting teams here in Canberra. So from one person's idea and just that notion of sharing your interest with others can create opportunities that you don't necessarily expect. So she's just passed making 1,000 scrunchies, and so she's combining that enterprise, which she does at home, with the support of a job mentor, and sells her scrunchies through Instagram, Facebook, and also some of the markets here in Canberra. She is also combining that with her hobbies and is also studying at the moment as well. So another consideration you might have is thinking about combining part-time work while your young person is there at school, or thinking about multiple part-time paid jobs after school, which is what we know families do as well. So initially you might look for the cash in hand jobs, and what that does is really helps to instill an understanding of earning money in exchange for work. So sometimes we hear questions asked around how do we motivate our son or daughter into work, and having that cash can really help to increase that motivation. So some of the early ideas, Jan talked earlier about some informal experiences that you might do within your neighbourhood. So that might include things like pet minding, mail delivery or collecting mail, being a referee, doing mowing, babysitting, or thinking about like a creative kind of small business like Chloe's. They might be making jewelry, cards, other things. I guess it's really around, again, finding those things that your young person might be interested in. Plan for this. You might be planning in terms of when school finishes, or you might be thinking about it after the school day, on weekends, or some seasonal work in school holidays. Another thing to look at is gig platforms like Airtasker. So we'll send you the link to this. It's a bit hard to read, but it's a screenshot of Airtasker. So what this does is you might find jobs in there that people are looking for that might suit your son or daughter down to the ground. It's one-off jobs that people are looking for, typically around their residence. It also might give you ideas about different jobs that might be suited to your young and daughter, your son or daughter, that you might not have considered. But it can be a good way. It covers the liability insurance of jobs. So it's a interesting kind of platform to have a look at in terms of thinking about non-traditional paid work options. So the fourth section of customised employment is around setting the young person up for growth from day one. We're going to go into detail around this in a lot more in webinar 2. So we're going to talk about how you identify those tasks. Jen alluded to those tasks that really help your son or daughter to shine in the workplace, and thinking about tasks that are clear about whether they're done or not done. We're going to be talking about preparing the young person. So this is things that you or your job mentor might be able to do with the young person before they start the job. So you might remember back in Annie's video when they were talking about playing games to increase her skills around money. It will be those sorts of things that you might be able to do in preparation. We're going to talk about task analysis, which is really just about breaking down every task into teachable steps, and what sits alongside that is a really good practice thing called systematic instruction, which we know helps particularly people with intellectual disability to learn things on the jobs, and that is around a system of prompting. We're also going to be talking about how you can best capture the learning during work experience, paid work and the like, so that it sets the young person up for future opportunities as well. So that concludes our talk today, and so some key messages that we wanted you to have around having a positive mindset and taking action. If you're looking at a place to start, if this is all new to you, and often this can seem very overwhelming once you've got all the information, but a great place to start is around thinking about a vision for your family member, and thinking about what is a typical life and how aspects of the good life might relate to your hopes and dreams for your son or daughter. You might like to reach out to others to help you to achieve your vision, and you might consider at this stage engaging a job mentor early. You want to build that discovery profile of your son or daughter with others. It's great to then brainstorm some possible workplace links based on your discovery findings. Then the next stage is to gather information about workplaces through talking to people, talking to employers, researching on the internet, making a visual resume, which we'll talk about in webinar 2 more, how to propose an opportunity both in writing or in person, setting the young person up for success on the job, and that notion of pursuing multiple opportunities. So think about the informal opportunities in your home and neighbourhood, work experience, micro-enterprise, part-time paid work, and apprenticeships. So the webinar, which will be sent to you very shortly, we would love if you could please complete our feedback form. The QR code, which is on this page, could be accessed via your phone. It will really help us to both structure future webinars and also will help us to sustain this over time. So we're going to answer some questions that were posed in the registration questions, but our next webinar is Thursday, the 19th of August at 12, and we're going to be looking at the pitch, paid work, a bit more about apprenticeships, micro-enterprise, setting your young person up for success, and go into more detail about systematic instruction and task analysis.
So we're just going to move into the Q&A now around, and this came through in the registration forms, and we're hoping we've probably covered all of these, but we've just probably got a few other points that we could help with your thinking around this question of how can volunteering lead to employment. So some of the things that we hope that you may have learned through what you've heard today is the importance of discovery. So yes, volunteering could be really helpful in discovering more about the person. Maybe look for different volunteering experiences that are small and not necessarily the ones that usually come straight to mind, like going to Binnies or RSPCA or those types. Like, look at some more niche ideas or something actually more locally in your neighbourhood. So such as, you know, helping out on working bees in the wetlands, or volunteering at your school, and doing this alongside other opportunities. So volunteering might be one thing that you're doing, but looking at work experience or that first paid job as well. Have you got any other ideas to add there, Fiona?
Yeah, just I guess to add on to what you were saying in terms of thinking about the organisations where you might or might not go. Yeah, just be aware that services with a very large volunteer pool, those are unlikely to lead to paid employment. And while they might be useful experience, I guess it's important to ask them up front about whether there is any opportunity for it to turn into paid work.
Yeah, great, thank you. So the next one is how to get support for work experience when there are behavioural issues. What to do when the supports are just not available in the ACT. So we've actually got quite a few videos on our website from Anne Greer, who is fabulous at helping you understand what those behaviour whispers might be. So I know she would be saying is really understand what is the behaviour trying to communicate. And, you know, we were both talking today around setting the person up for success. So what are the conditions for success in a workplace that's going to then work well for the person? So really understanding that, putting that time and effort into understanding what are the tasks that are going to be involved in the job or the work experience, so you can really set the person up well. They could be practicing at home beforehand. They could be watching some videos of someone that has recorded what the tasks are, so you're eliminating all of that sound that might be distracting for the young person. So then it's alleviating that anxiety before they start the job. So have you got some other tips, Fiona?
Yeah, I guess, going back to anxiety can be a particular trigger for behaviour, and I guess at the beginning, in terms of exposing people slowly to the work environment and trying to also get that really good fit between people, and just really giving it time and going very slowly. And I guess in terms of bringing on new tasks, only doing that like really, really gradually once, you know, the young person's gotten used to a particular environment.
Yeah, and with regards to the supports, I mean, I'm not sure whether your young person has NDIS funding, but you could potentially look at self-managing that and directly employing some staff. That way you can actually do training that's really targeted to support your young person really well. We've actually got a roles-based recruitment process that you can follow that's on our website, that's part of the resource pack that you've received today. And hopefully that might help you find the right person, because that can be really supportive for that young person to succeed. And the final question that we've got here is there an organisation that can assist with preparation for work, workplace etiquette and workplace expectations, etc.? Fiona, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I guess you will find various get ready work group programs for people. What we know is that it is really difficult for people to transfer learning from a class-based, a classroom-based environment to a workplace environment. And we also know that I guess the expectations of different workplaces are so different. It can be difficult to learn that generally anyway. It's particularly if the young person hasn't had any exposure to work environments before. It's can be quite a theoretical thing. But next webinar, we are going to go into this in a lot more depth in terms of how you might prepare a young person to enter into a particular workplace. But what we would suggest is for where there are providers that do work readiness type programs, ask if they could be individualised to your son or daughter. And yeah, I guess asking in terms of how they adapt it to different work environments.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And I hope you've got some information that's really relevant to you right now. Please don't feel overwhelmed. You don't have to do it all tomorrow, but just pick something to then make that your first step. And we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Bye, everyone.